In this video, I'm going to take you through the process of constructing your slab box. So this is going to get all of the sides, the top and the bottom put together, but we'll do cutting the lid and decorating in another segment. So I have my slabs that I put into a bag. So I'm going to take them out. And then I put them in between those pieces of newspaper. So I want to go ahead now and take my slabs out of the newspaper. And so my clay has set up a little bit. And the newspaper feels damp because it's been taking that moisture out of the slabs and helping to absorb it. And then you don't need to keep this newspaper for anything because it has moisture in it, it's damp, it really can't be reused very well, so you can recycle the newspaper. I don't need my board for right now, so I'm also going to set that aside. So I have my 6 slabs to make my slab container or box, and then I also brought with me these tools. So I have the fettling knife, I have the needle tool, the serrated metal rib, so the one with the teeth, the smooth metal rib, so no teeth, and then a wood tool. The wood tool that I picked has one that has a point to it, so it's kind of like a slant to a triangle point, and then it also has this round back. That's just a wood tool that I like. If you don't have one that looks exactly like this, maybe it has that round back on one end, maybe it has a slant on another one of your wood tools, it's definitely okay to have more than one. So I'm going to go ahead and grab one of my slabs, and this is going to be the base. So what's really important about slab construction is that we are going to construct on top of the base. So never on the side like this. This is a really weak joint. If it's on top of the base, it's going to have a much stronger joint. So just like with everything else that we've done this quarter, whenever you are attaching parts, you have to score and to slip it. So I'm using the needle tool. I like the needle tool. It's one of my favorite tools to score with. I think it's easy to use, but you might want to use the serrated rib, and that's okay. So I need to make sure that I rough up both sides, the part that I'm attaching and where I'm attaching. This is a common mistake that students do, and so then they don't have a good strong bond. So remember that you need to do where you're attaching and then what you're attaching. Okay, so make sure that you have some gray slip. If you need a refill on your slip, just let me know. I can get you more. And slip again is just wet mushy clay that acts like our glue. So it's really important that you have this because this is what's helped keeping your piece together. So I'm going to set this on, but I'm just going to leave it there. Okay, so I'm going to set it on and then I'm going to kind of wiggle it a little bit and press it into place. And I'm just going to remove some of the extra slip from the outside. I'm not going to do anything else to the outside just yet. All right, so I'm going to remove that slip. Now there's a little bit of extra slip on the inside. I can just remove that with my finger as well. So you may have remembered I told you to hold on to your extra clay. So I'm going to dig my extra clay out of the bag because you need that extra clay to create a support. The support's going to go in the inside seam, and this is going to add extra strength. Because if you think about it, we just have a very small part right now that's attached. So I just took some of my clay and I rolled it between my hands like I was making a coil, but then I want to smear it. So I'm going to kind of hold my slab from the back. If I don't, I could potentially push that slab off and damage it. I don't want to do that. And then I am blending this coil so that it is smeared on the inside. So it doesn't look like a coil. I just didn't lay a coil in there. This isn't going to do anything. Smearing the clay into the joint helps to create a stronger bond. It helps create support. So I had to hold the outside so I didn't push it off. So right now I have side one up. So I'm going to take another one of my sides, and again, on top of the base. So I'm just kind of putting into place so I can see. And so that means I'm going to have to score where these two pieces touch and then where it touches along the bottom as well. So you can't just score one spot and expect it to stay. So if you want to use your serrated metal rib, you can, but you don't need to score the whole area. So sometimes I like to just use that needle tool. And then you got to go up the side. So our slabs are 1/4 inch. So you kind of have to guesstimate where 1/4 inch is and rough up the inside. So see, I have where I'm going to attach it on the side, and then I have where I'm attaching it on my base. So again, 2 sides are touching, so that means I need to score those as well. And the serrated metal rib is always faster because you can cover more area, but the needle tool is nice because you can make a better scoring mark. I mean, you have to be really cautious or conscious of your scoring marks when you're using the serrated metal rib to really rough that up. And then I'm going to put glue on what I'm attaching and where I'm attaching. Again, some artists might tell you that that's redundant, meaning you don't have to do it because it's the same. But the reason why I have you guys do that is because I've learned high school students don't always use enough slip, and therefore their pieces fall apart. So I can't just set it there. Remember, I got to press it together. So I'm really squeezing. I also don't want to trap any air between my base and my side. And I don't want to trap any air between the sides where I put them together. Again, I'm just kind of blending out the excess clay for right now. I'm not worried about the outside. Okay, so just like before, I now have to put a support at the bottom and up into this middle seam. So remember that that support clay is just a piece, and I kind of roll it into a coil, but it doesn't stay as a coil. I'm holding the outside. So I'm not just pushing my finger into the clay. I have to hold that outside. And because I'm smearing it, I usually have extra clay. I didn't need all of this clay. So there I did the bottom support on this side. But now I need to do this part here. So occasionally I will turn it. Now I want to remember what part's my base, but that way I can hold tight on the outside and get that support seam into, or the support clay into that seam. It's really, really important that you do this. Really awful things can happen to your piece if you forget. So now I'm going to flip it back on its base. You might have a little bit of overhang. The reason for that is because we used a 5x5 square for all of our sides. And if they're 1/4 inch thick, we're taking a 1/4 inch of thickness as we go around. So I want to make sure with this next piece that if there is some overhang, that I don't put it at an angle so that it's not straight, that I have it straight with the bottom. So this extra I'll cut off in a little bit. So again, it's touching here and here, so I need to score. Then I also need to score up the wall and onto the base. So this time I'm going to use my needle tool, and that's just mainly because I like it. You don't have to switch tools for every side that you put on. And remember to come in a little bit. And if I score all the way to the outside edge, I'm going to trim that off, so it really doesn't matter. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my glue on. And then I want to make sure that before I attach it, I score. Sometimes I'll have students forget to do that part, and then they've only half scored and slipped it. So you can see now I just switched to the serrated rib, just so that you get an idea of the kind of marks you can make. And I like you to put slip on both parts, just to make sure we have enough glue. So if you run out of slip, you can always add some water to some clay. Or if you're in the studio, you can just ask me for some more. So again, I got to push those sides tight together. I don't want to trap any air, and I want to make sure I have a strong bond. So I had some overhang, so that's natural for this to kind of look funky right here because I got to trim this off. But for right now, it's going to make sure that I have it glued kind of in the right spot. And then I'm just going to remove some of that excess slip again and a little bit from the outside. not too worried about the outside right now. So just like before, now I need to put support clay in this area and into the corner. So I'm going to flip it on its side. So remember, if you flipped it to its side, so the base right now is right here. And I'm aware of that. I know where the base is. But this makes it a little easier for me to get my hand inside so I can put that support clay in. Okay. Then I'm going to flip it upright. Because of that excess hanging off, it would be a little weird or awkward. And so I think I can get my support clay in with it upright. So I'm going to go ahead and put that support clay inside. The support clay helps prevent your piece from maybe cracking and falling apart. That is a very high risk that you take in ceramics, especially when working with slabs, is cracking. So right now, I have most of it together. I have 2 more pieces to add. And so the last piece, I have a little bit of overhang here. I have a little bit of overhang here. And before I put this last piece on, I'm just going to remove this little bit of overhang that's on the side here. So I'm going to take my fettling knife, and I'm going to go very slow, and I'm going to hold my fettling knife flush to the surface, and I'm just going to trim that off. Now I want to go slow, and just take a little bit off at a time. I can come back and correct that more if I need to, but for right now, I just took a little bit of that excess off. Okay, you're going to need your extra clay, so you want to make sure that you put that with your other extra clay so it doesn't dry out. Now before I put this last side on, you can also see that I have a little overhang here. So they're not even. So I'm going to gently just start by trimming a little bit away. And then I can come back in. And I can trim a little bit more. I want to do things slowly. If I start cutting off things too quickly, I potentially could be cutting off something that I need, and then I won't be able to put it back together. Okay, so if I look over here, there's maybe just a slight overhang. And if you notice right here, there's like a little dark spot. That's a gap between my coil and my wall. I have to press that out because there's air in there. And if there's air in there and I put my last piece on, I could trap an air bubble. So I'm glad that I saw that. So now I'm going to rotate this. And I'm going to take just a tiny bit off of this side. So now I'm ready for my last wall. And you might be thinking, how do I do this? Because this piece is still 5 by 5, but I have a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch slab thickness on both sides. So I want this piece to slide in. So technically I need to cut a 1/2 inch off of my last square for the side. I still have 1 more square for the top, but this is going to be my last square or side piece. Okay, so one thing that I do is I'll just kind of set it on the table, and then if I push this over, so this is the 1/4 inch space, and then here I can see and make a little mark here where that piece is. So that's about a 1/2 inch. The other thing that I could do is to take a ruler and cut a 1/2 inch. I'm kind of eyeing it, which is good and bad, because usually you can kind of do it the way you need to, and then sometimes you might cut too much or maybe not cut straight. So using a ruler is fine. So see how I slid this last piece in? And I did that by trimming off a 1/2 inch from this last side. Okay, so this is the most scoring I'm going to have to do. 3 sides touch. So I need to make sure that I score where they're touching, and I have to go up the sidewall. Students forget the sidewalls sometimes, and then we have a problem because you're not going to have the proper attachment. So now I'm going to continue scoring that last side. So I scored down here, up this wall, and then that means I need to score 3 sides of my last piece. Really rough up that surface. Slabs are prone to cracking because there's a lot of seam lines. There's a lot of spaces where they are touching and they're fragile there. So it's really, really important to score and slip and use a lot of slip. That's why I'm making you put it on all the sides that are scored. Some people will say, oh, you don't have to do that. That's true, you don't. But I want to make sure that your stuff doesn't fall apart on you, and so that's why I want you to do that. Okay? Then I'm going to slide my piece in, and I can't just set it there. I got to press it together. Okay? So that's going to help make sure that I get rid of any air, make sure it's in the right spot. So it's kind of bubbled out there. I got to press it on just a little bit. Press it in. This is really important. You cannot just set your pieces there. You really got to press them nice and tight together. Okay. So the next thing that I need to do before I can focus on the outside or putting my top on is, of course, I have to put my supports on the inside. So this last wall is a little tricky to get to, and so I turned it on its side so that way I can take my extra clay and put supports in. If you forget the supports, I can almost 100% guarantee you that your slab piece will crack, break, or fall apart. I can almost 100% guarantee that to you, that will happen. So it is so important that you take all your practice from your other projects where you scored and slipped and then pressed things together to make sure that you do a really, really good job with this. Now, I know that we're just all making a box, and in other quarters, when we have more time in the studio, we're able to be a little bit more creative. So I really want you to think about how you can decorate your container, your cubed box with a theme. How are you going to make it maybe something about you or something interesting or something that you like so that the viewer wants to look at it? And then I'm just double checking that everything is attached tight, and I'm still squishing some air out. Okay, so now I'm ready to put my last piece to make it a cube. That's how we're starting the lidded piece. So today I'm going to talk about the cube, and then another day, like I said, we'll talk about how you're going to make your lid. So for right now, I would need to make sure that this is level. And right now, if I take my fettling knife over it, it's high right there. So I could start by dragging my fettling knife, or again, I can use that cutting edge and just take a tiny bit off. So I'm kind of eyeing this. I can tell that this is that high side still. So all that practice with trimming with your pinch pots, with trimming some things with your coil piece, is all helping you get better at these basic skills so that when we are doing this part, this becomes easier and more natural. So I'm kind of running that knife over, and it's helping me see where I still have some high spots. So I feel a lot better. I don't have one side that goes or one side that dips way down. If you do, your box is going to look funky. All right. Remember your extra clay you want to stuff into your bag. Right now, I'm sitting under one of the vents, and so that vent is kind of drying my clay a little bit more than I'd like. So it's important with your extra stuff that you leave it in a bag. So this one's going to go on top. This is the only attachment that we've done on top like this. But honestly, it's the same kind of attachment that we did with our base, only we put the pieces on top of the base. So it's like doing another base, but this time you get to put it on top of your sides. So again, you have to score where you're attaching. And if your clay wasn't leather hard, it wouldn't be able to support all the moving I did with it. Like I've flopped it from side to side. I've moved it around quite a bit. I'm going to rotate. And so I'm just really roughing that up. I mean, my scoring marks look crazy. That's kind of how I know you've done a good job, is when they're all roughed up and they're not smooth looking. Now this time, because we're putting it on top, we can't do the edges. It's not going to touch there. It's actually going to touch about a 1/4 inch in. So with my needle tool, I'm just kind of drawing a guide. So I know that I have to score from where the line is to the outer edge. And if I just kind of draw that line in there, that just kind of helps me eyeball or to see what a 1/4 inch kind of looks like. And then I rough the heck out of it. The only thing holding your cube together is the scoring marks and the slip. So it's really, really important that you do a good job of scoring and slipping. It can be a little time consuming, but if it means your piece isn't going to fall apart or break or crack, then that's a good thing. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on top, and I'm just going to press on the edge. I don't want to press into the middle, or I'm going to damage my piece. So I'm going to press, and then I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to press. I can also flip it upside down. Now, one thing we can't do right now is to put the support clay in. You're going to have to wait until we can cut the top of your box off. And so that's not going to happen right now. So what I want to work on right now is getting my outside seams. So I'm going to use my wood tool, and I'm going to use that slant part, and I'm going to rub over it. I can also kind of go down at an angle a little bit. I'm going to rub over. If I can see a seam, I can almost 100% guarantee you that you'll get a crack there. So it's really, really, really important that you rub them out. Make sure everywhere you see one, you take care of it. And it's better if you can get all of this done like in a class period. That would be ideal, because then you could wrap it for the next time you're in the studio. So here I'm gonna, and I am removing a little bit of clay. So I'm looking for where all my seams are. Now I have a slight push here, and I can't get it blended very well. So I might have to wait for that side until I cut the lid off. And then here, I'll make sure that I get all the sides, because there's multiple sides that have seams. And here I have multiple sides that have seams. Again, if you can see a seam, you are a high risk for a crack or breakage to occur. Now, some of you might be alarmed that we've created a cube, but we're going to cut our lid off, and so it will be not a giant kiln bomb, because right now it is. It has all kinds of air trapped on the inside of it. Okay, so I've done a decent job of blending my seams out, and that was just using my wood tool. But you can see by doing that, I kind of pushed the slab around weird. So I'm going to come back in with my fettling knife, and I'm going to hold the knife up against the surface and then just kind of trim down. So here I have a little excess. I'm not digging in, I'm just going down. Then I'm going to keep rotating my container. Try to keep that as level with the surface as possible. just to get rid of any excess that's hanging off the edges maybe, or got pushed out when I was rubbing those seams in. At this point, it doesn't matter if I remember what's the top or the bottom. I will need to know for later, but I should be able to tell because the last piece I added is technically our top because it doesn't have any support clay in the seams yet. So you will be adding. Now, I am going slow and trying to be very careful with how much I trim off. Our slabs are only 1/4 inch thick, so it would be very easy for me to trim a hole by trying to clean this up. Okay, so that's a little bit better. It's not perfect yet, but it's getting there. I can also go with the smooth metal rib and try to smooth out a little bit. My sides. And then I just continue to rotate it around. Now I make everything look fairly easy to do, but you have to remember that I've been working with clay for quite a long time now. And many of you, this is your first high school experience with clay. Some of you had clay in middle school. Some of you may have not. Some of you may have done clay in elementary school, and some of you may have not. So if it takes you longer than what I'm showing right now, that's pretty normal. And I just kind of keep working back and forth. Like, okay, so when I did the rubber, or the metal rib, the smooth one, I push the sides a little bit so then I can trim more of those edges off, but I'm just taking a very little bit at a time. Very little bit at a time. Maybe I want to turn it on this side now and look at it. Like, okay, so things are pushing out a little bit higher over here, so I'm going to push down and try to level that. When I did that, then I pushed some clay off to the side, so now I have to come back in and trim some of that clay away. My biggest recommendation, just go slow. Try to remove the seams, work back and forth. And your goal, before you call it quits on the cube, is to try to have things pretty even. Now, it may never be 100% even, because you have to consider that you're hand building this. You are not a machine. You used a machine to make your slabs. But that doesn't necessarily mean that when I cut my slabs, I cut them 100% perfect. And so there might be some slight things that make it from being 100% cube-like. But if I keep working at it, I can really even some things up. And this is a lot easier to do some of this work when it's in the cube and you haven't cut your lid off just yet. But there's some areas that are harder to. So like up front here, this area is denting in. I'm probably not going to be able to fix that until I get my support clay in there. And so that's not going to happen until after I cut my lid off. Right? So I would continue to work until I'm really satisfied with how it looks. Right now there's still a little overhang, so I would continue to keep trimming and going. So when you get to about this point, you can call it good for now. And then if you are going to be gone from the studio, it's a good idea to wrap this in a damp paper towel, not like a highly saturated paper towel, but damp. Wrap it in the damp paper towel on all the sides and then put it into a plastic bag until the next time you're in the studio. The next time in your studio, that you're in the studio, then you would be able to cut the lid. So that's what our next segment will be about, is cutting the lid and then kind of finishing cleaning it up before you get into the fun part, which is where you get to decorate it. So I'm going to pause for a moment so I can grab an example piece to show you on kind of what we don't want to have happen. So hold on just a moment. So I brought some example pieces over to the table. Some of them are okay, and some of them have some issues. So the first one I want to show you is this one here. It didn't actually get turned into a box, but it is an open cube. And the first thing you're going to notice about it is that the sides are really uneven in length. And a lot of that is because of how they attach the pieces. If you notice this piece, it hits the side and then it's attached on top of the edge. So it needs to be side to side. It can't be side and then top of the edge. And the same thing happened with this piece down here. So that really kind of deformed the shape of the cube, and so it's almost like a diamond, kind of close-ish. But it looks not very good. The other thing about this particular example is that you can see this seam right here, and there's a hole. So I can actually look from the inside all the way out to the outside and see my computer. So that tells me that this student did not understand how to attach parts. They put them in the wrong spot, and then they didn't score and slip the right areas. So here it has scoring on this edge, but they needed to score the inside. And then they were unable to push it together because they attached it in the wrong spot on the bottom. And if you notice on their bottom, all of these are side attachments. So it's on the side of the base. And that's one reason why this is cracking and separating. And then they also just didn't press it together. So this entire wall is barely hanging on. And then you can see that there's gaps over in this one too. So they really struggled with the construction of their piece. They also didn't level it out. There's a really high spot here and a really low spot. So that's why you want to go super slow, because you don't want to just like or you want to make sure that you cut it as even as you can. And maybe that's just taking a little bit away at a time. So this box has a lot of construction issues. You can see even this seam isn't attached properly. They scored this side of the slab, but attached it here. So where they scored doesn't match up to where it touches. Remember, scoring and slipping has to happen where it touches. And then where they put the slab doesn't make sense because they didn't trim this piece, so it pushed these way out. So it's important that you are paying attention to what part you're attaching, where you're attaching, that you score and slip in the proper location so that this sort of disaster, construction-wise, doesn't happen to you. The other example that I have is this one. And this is a cubed box, but you can see that there's a huge chunk up here. That's because they had problems during the glazing process, and they let the glaze stick in between, and so it fused this chunk. They asked me to try to remove it, and I did with the chisel and a hammer, but by doing that, it broke the part of the lid off. You can also see that when they did their lid, it's not a straight cut. They have it kind of waved, which is a good idea, but the waves are uneven and not nicely done, so that it was difficult to get this piece to come out. And then you can see over here that that wave has a lot of gaps. And here we're missing an entire chunk of the lid. On this side, it fits pretty good. The spacing isn't too bad. It's not too tight. But unfortunately, that's where our lid broke. The other thing is that this is supposed to be based on a theme. So they are a Miami Dolphins fan, which is our MD. We have a helmet, which looks like a giant blob. We have what's supposed to be the dolphin. And then we have the football jersey. So I don't want you to feel bad if you're not quote-unquote good at drawing. There are some things that we can do to help you get images to the side, or maybe you want to add additional 3D parts to the outside of your piece so that it is a little bit more interesting. And that's what they attempted to do with the MD, and that might be probably the best part, honestly. They also added a handle, but it's not really a functional handle. Like, I can't really pick it up with that handle very well. So it's more of a lid that you pull off. So handles are optional, but I would think about how the handle might function better than this particular one. So I want you to be really careful with construction, and then when we get to the lid part, we want to think about how can I keep it from sliding off, but also how can I keep it from sticking in the glazing process. And then the last example is a little bit more of a cube, and its lid kind of slides. So there's a wave, so it sits on there, but because that wave is a little too gradual and not anything, maybe a little bit here and here, that's what kind of keeps it, but it slides too easy. So we need to have something in your lid to keep it from sliding off, but also from not getting stuck. What is nice about this piece is that it has a consistent design, and so the theme is this sort of fabric or pattern design that you might see maybe in a Native American blanket or something maybe from the Southwest. So it was carved. So all of the surface has raised and lowered areas and texture. Then it was underglazed so it could have nice little detailed patterns and designs. See how that lid slides all weird. So those are some things to think about as you get ready to make your slab cube, and it will ultimately have a lid and be turned into a box. So my cube needs to sit at least overnight, and then I will show you how to cut the lid, put that support clay in the inside seam, finish smoothing things out and making it level and even, and then you'll be ready to start designing.